ask and you shall receive. Here it is. Kyle Dubas, an era wasted. Going completely against the norm, this story actually broke during the Steve Dangle podcast. We were convinced something was going to happen after Friday heading into a long weekend. Thanks very much! But at just a few minutes past noon, the Toronto Maple Leafs tweeted, "The club has decided to part ways with general manager Kyle Dubas." Let me do a quick read and then we're going to jump right into this. Why not make your bet on the Final Four with Sports Interaction? Believe it or not, the playoffs are still going on, even though they're not going on for the Leafs, and that's, you know, people get fired sometimes. It's the third round now. We're down to the Final Four. Vegas, Dallas, Carolina, Florida in septuple overtime. No, it's 7 periods quadruple overtime. Math is hard. Every shot, every play, every decision is magnified. With competitive odds, the best live in play, and more ways to get into the game than ever, visit sportsinteraction.com/SDPN and download the Sports Interaction app, but only if you're 19 plus. Please play responsibly. There was nothing cute and adorable about what happened today, but I do find the statement cute and adorable. Reminder that it said the club has decided to part ways with general manager Kyle Dubas. And that's what I thought. They simply decided to part ways. It was mutual because, after all, Kyle Dubas' contract is over at the end of this season. And that's what we talked about on the Steve Dangle podcast earlier today. That episode is already up on the SDPN YouTube channel, Spotify, everything. We talked about Dubas' tenure as a Leaf, all the way back from when he was hired as an assistant general manager in 2014, when he took over from Lou Lamoriello in 2018, the decisions he made, the regular seasons that are unmatched in franchise history, and the playoff futility that is somehow, for this team, unmatched in nature in franchise history. We talked about all that. We went down all these winding roads. Then, at about 3 o'clock, Brendan Shanahan, the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs, spoke, and there was no parting ways about it. Kyle Dubas got fired. Brendan Shanahan fired that guy, and he fired him so hard. I'm going to talk a lot about Brendan Shanahan's words today, and there are press conference clips in this video because it's important that you hear those words. Here's the yada 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 of it all. The Toronto Maple Leafs have a first round series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and not everything goes great, but I tell you what, they come out with some plucky wins and 3 overtime wins on the road, exactly the sort of wins that were just not available to them in abundance in the past. And after 19 long years, John Tavares spins, fires, he scores, and we all go crazy. And Vasilevsky and the Lightning, finally, they don't go to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2019. And the Leafs, the Leafs, they finally went around, and guess what? They're going to take on the they lost? Well, they're going to take on the Panthers. And in that series against the Panthers, they get mopped. Absolutely mopped. They go down 0-3. They play a pretty good Game 4 to bring the series to 5. Game 5 goes overtime and they lose. And Sheldon Keefe, the coach of the team, for now, makes a statement about, well, you know, the series was really lost after going down 3-0. And yeah, no kidding, only 4 teams have ever come back from that. The last team to come back from that was the 2014 LA Kings, and a couple months after they came back from that, Dubas was hired as AGM of the Leafs. Despite it all, despite the fact that the Leafs had a rather ugly loss in the second round, completely undoing all of the goodwill generated by finally winning a round, the Leafs were willing to offer Kyle Dubas a contract extension. And it sounds like he was made an offer. Then Monday happened. Locker cleanup. It was 6.5 hours long. It was way too long. And Kyle Dubas spoke last, and perhaps against his better judgment, he spoke last. Within his statement, and following a question from reporter Chris Johnston, Dubas spoke about the toll that this season took on himself and on his family, and how he needed some time to consider things. On a human level, me, you, any fan, I think you can appreciate that. And I think you can appreciate what he can go through as the GM of the Leafs and what his family can go through, you know, being the family of the GM of the Leafs. And I think we can all sympathize with that. But here is how Brendan Shanahan viewed those words from Kyle Dubas, and he gave us a little glimpse into the days that followed.
Timeline on the Kyle Dubas contract. I suppose you could go back to last offseason. I approached Kyle in his office at the Ford Performance Center and explained to him that he would be not receiving a contract offer prior to his final year of his contract, and that it was my hope and it was my intention that at the end of the year and after being judged for the full 5 years of his contract, that we would be extending him and moving forward. If you're judging him on the work he did last summer, some of the decisions of letting players go, of signing some players, I think it's a challenging job for any general manager, and I think Kyle did an excellent job. Going throughout the year, the way that the team was managed, I had no issue with that. As a matter of fact, I thought that, again, Kyle did an excellent job. The trade deadline, again, going back to his process and the way that our team does this here under his leadership, there's a lot of input, and I thought that he made some very good moves. And I thought he had prepared the team to the best of his ability, as any GM can do after the trade deadline. There's not as much for a GM to do. Around the middle of March, I approached Kyle in his office at Ford Performance Center and told him that I had seen enough in my mind that I had wanted him to be our general manager going forward. Came back to me about a week later and said yes, that he was comfortable moving forward, and he gave me the name of his agent, or he said his agent would reach out to me, but that he didn't want this to be a distraction for him, and I respected his wishes, that I wasn't going to discuss it with him any further at that point. When the season did end, unfortunately, abruptly, it was very important to me that I was ready to go. I presented him with what I thought was a framework that reflected what his agent and I had talked to, and a good finishing place in the effort to get this done as soon as possible. And let me go back. I would also say part of our conversation in my office was that this was hard on his family. In fairness, we talked about that, how, quite frankly, it's hard on all our families. It's a difficult thing. It's hard on the players, the parents, but it's the job we choose. It's the sport we choose. We're very fortunate to be in it, but it does not come without a toll on the families. And I completely acknowledge that. And we talked a little bit about that. While watching Kyle's press, I think at that point, there was a shift in my thinking at that moment, a dramatical shift in my thinking as I drove home that night, that, as Kyle expressed, he might not want to be our GM, and I have to take that very seriously. As I had said to him the day before, I understood those feelings and the pressure that players are under, the pressure that management, coaches, family members are under. But it was a very real possibility for me at that point that I would be needing to look somewhere else. And it's, as part of my job, that is what I began to do, while still hoping that Kyle and I could come to some sort of a resolution. To Thursday, the next day, Kyle had said that his agent was going to call me and that he would reach out to me as well. I got a call in the afternoon from his agent, and basically a new financial package was presented to me by the agent. The conversation was brief. I did not hear from Kyle throughout the day, and I went home, and just before dinner time, I got an email from Kyle saying that he did want to be the general manager of the Maple Leafs. At that point, I have to, if I'm being honest, I had gotten to a different place about how I felt about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs and what was best. And as hard as it was, and as hard as it is to make a significant change to somebody that you're close to and that you've been working with for 9 years, even though I was presented with, a gap had risen within the contract status. And, but nevertheless, the email that I received from Kyle, I just felt differently. And I felt that the long-term future of the Maple Leafs might have to change. And slept on that, and woke up this morning, drove to Kyle's office at Ford Performance Center and informed him that we were not going to be renewing his contract.
Wow. So that's wildly in depth. Immediately with the press conference, the seed of doubt is sown in Brendan Shanahan. And already he, and I'm sure some people with the board and ownership, were thinking maybe this isn't the guy. In Brendan Shanahan's words, he wasn't sure this person wanted to be the GM of the Leafs, which is bad. Then, in the following days, after relative radio silence, the agent for the guy who's not sure he wants to be the GM of the Leafs contacts you and says, hey, how about you give us more money than you're already offering? And it sounds like pretty soon after that, and getting an email from Dubas saying, hey, I do actually want to do this job, Shanahan promptly showed up and fired him. Now, there's a couple different ways to interpret this sequence of events. This one from Jake B. Leafs is kind of funny. Experiment. Go on live TV. Ensure your boss is watching, and many thousands of others. Say you might not have the stuff to continue the job. Then turn your phone on Do Not Disturb, and 2 days later, advise your boss that you are seeking a 50% raise. Report back. Thanks. Well, when you put it that way, yeah, I can understand why he was fired in that regard. There are a few ways where I can empathize and understand what Brendan Shanahan and the Toronto Maple Leafs did. If the guy is going to be wishy-washy about whether he wants to do this, if he's going to ask for more money, and you have to make decisions lickety-split. The next 5 weeks are going to define the franchise. There's the draft in just about 5 weeks. Mitch Marner's no move, no trade, whatever it is clause kicks in just about 5 weeks. Austin Matthews and William Nylander are eligible for contract extensions in just about 5 weeks. And if they don't sign those extensions in relatively short order, you have to strongly consider trading them. And I'm serious. That is a real consideration. Remember that whole thing that Islanders fans were very upset about for a very long time with John Tavares? That might happen. That might happen with both William Nylander and Austin Matthews. Do you want to go into the season with the uncertainty that those guys might achieve nothing, walk after achieving nothing, and then you lose them for nothing? That is a very real consideration. So I don't have time to sit around and wait for you, as cruel as that sounds. So this isn't necessarily about auditing the job that Kyle Dubas has done, because the Toronto Maple Leafs were not dissatisfied with the job Kyle Dubas has done. And we know that because they offered him a contract extension. They did. They offered him a contract extension, and they didn't rescind it until he said words in front of a microphone and camera. They were satisfied with the trades, the draft, the dudes he signed, everything. They were satisfied with that enough that they were willing to offer him millions of dollars to continue to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we can sit here and audit the job that Dubas did. The Leafs were satisfied with it, and that's not why he was fired. But here's where Shanahan loses me. Brendan Shanahan gets to fire Kyle Dubas. And my question is, why? Why? This dude has been the president of the team since 2013. He brought Dubas in his 20s. He was 28 when they signed him to be the AGM in 2014. He was not much older than that when he was to replace Lou Lamoriello, the most tenured general manager ever. He replaced him in the biggest hockey market that there is, or the most hockey mad market, or certainly the market that is the most difficult to win in, apparently. He had this dude in his early 30s replace Lou Lamoriello. And he achieved what? Some of the greatest regular seasons in Toronto Maple Leafs history, absolutely, but continued failure in the playoffs. It's really wild. You can talk about like the Blues and the Caps, two teams who took forever to win their trophies with a ton of regular season success, but they were never able to get over the hump. A team like the San Jose Sharks, who's been great like basically forever, but they can't win the Stanley Cup. All those teams had deep runs though. like before they actually achieved success. The Sharks went to the Stanley Cup final in 2016, for crying out loud. All these teams had runs that you could look back on. These guys won one round! One! Dubas replaced Lou Lamoriello. He locked up the core, anticipating that the cap would go up. The cap did not go up because the world stopped because of COVID, and he didn't adjust. He didn't trade anybody. So I can easily see how you would view the Leafs' struggles over recent years as Kyle Dubas' fault. And my question is, if all of this is Kyle Dubas' fault, why isn't Brendan Shanahan fired right along with him? This was his guy. Through and through, this was his guy. And there are rumors that his guy wasn't 100% allowed to do his job because Brendan Shanahan was in there saying yes to this decision or no to this decision. We don't know all the specifics. But why is this guy who has been here longer and endorsed every decision made through his not firing the dude, why has this guy who's been here for a decade, why was he allowed to go on TV and air all that dirty laundry? That was ugly. That was a shiv job from Brendan Shanahan to go on there and talk about how he perceived that press conference and talk about his agent then contacting me and asking for more money after I was like, you know what? I don't want this dude. I don't think this dude wants to be the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, that was really ugly and frankly backstabbing what Brendan Shanahan did to Kyle Dubas. And maybe there isn't a friendly and kind-hearted way to fire somebody, but Brendan Shanahan found the most cruel way possible to do it. And I think that's friggin' gross. So Dubas is gone. Whether you're sad about that or jacked about that, the dude at the top making decisions probably shouldn't be the dude at the top making decisions. And if he didn't have a couple years left on his contract, I'm fairly confident he wouldn't be the dude at the top making decisions. But these guys, MLSE, we talk about them like they're this golden goose that will never run out of money and they will spend whatever cost to win. Not true. Not true. They're upset about the fact that they're paying Babcock over $6 million. Still, to this day, Dubas got fired before Babcock's contract even expired, and I'm sure that's absolutely hilarious to some guy named Mike in Saskatchewan right now. But at the end of the day, Dubas made that decision with the endorsement of Brendan! With the endorsement of Brendan Shanahan. So, to me, they've made some changes. Maybe they're much needed changes. It's not enough. And now, they're still going into these 5 weeks that are going to define the franchise. They haven't put a label on it yet. I assume Brandon Pridham and Haley Wickenheiser and maybe Ryan Hardy, I assume the people currently in charge of the Leafs, the ones that are left, Jason Spezza among them, are going to be running the next month or so. They're going to be running the draft the way Dubas and Mark Hunter did in 2015. They're going to be making the trades. They're the ones who are going to be taxed with at least initiating talks with Austin Matthews and William Nylander. And if they're deciding to trade Mitch Marner, which it sounded like Kyle Dubas was willing to do, he was willing to change too late, I guess. If that is going to happen, if one of the core four, doesn't have to be Mitch, is going to get moved, it's either going to be Brandon Pridham and whoever's with him, or they're going to have to hire a GM with record-breaking speed. Buckle up, I guess, because I have no idea what's going on with this team. And even worse, I don't think they do. I need to emphasize, earlier this week is not even over. Earlier this week, the Toronto Maple Leafs thought Kyle Dubas was the guy for the job. And they changed their mind after a heartbreaking loss. They made a very emotional decision. And if you're a fan of this team, you better hope it's not the wrong one. So that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Brand new Steve Dangle podcast. Go to SDPN. Check that out. I'm sure you can come back to this channel whenever there's more news, which I doubt they're taking the long weekend. They're just going to torture us all with all sorts of stuff. Chris Johnston has given an unbelievable amount of insight on SDPN over the last few days. Buckle up.